I'm going to talk about growing things in a hot time. A few of you I know, many of you I don't. I'm fairly new to the UUCC community. I debated about whether to give you more of a bio of myself so I could say hello or let you know some of the traditions and lineages that brought me here. I will say that I come bringing lineages of aging punk rockers, speculative fiction lovers, contemporary artists, child-centered educators, Buddhist, earth-centered agnostic Unitarians, and many more. I come from Scandinavian Minnesota farmers, Oregon railroad workers, linguists, art and music lovers and makers, and many people who aren't very good at fitting into boxes. I grew up outside of DC and lived in that city for many years. After roaming around, living a few different lives, I landed here in Richmond and was glad to return to our chosen faith. I'm currently in seminary online at Stark King's School for the Ministry. And there are many ancestors I thank for getting to this moment here with you. I also want to acknowledge that my home where I am sitting right now would have been part of the Powhatan Confederation of Tribes at the time of the European arrival, and I name those ancestors and traditional custodians of this particular land. These days, my most settled spiritual practices are those that are small, in the world, and available frequently. Often they come down to practicing a quality of engagement. This is easiest for me around other living things, so a reliable place to work with is in my yard. I am, at best, a novice gardener. It is important to know that while I had done fairly well at keeping houseplants since college, I attempted 3 vegetable gardens before, all of them in Alaska. All of them ended quite sad, with little actual food coming from them. My first ended up mostly with wild kale, which I would graze on occasionally or get a few leaves for a smoothie. The second and third, I got tiny carrots, like micro carrots. Is that a thing? And that's about it. The garden boxes always ended up wild with exuberant stalks and giant holes from bugs. In the dark of my newness to the endeavor, I flailed around looking for answers. Is it too much water? Is the soil not rich enough? Is it too much shade? In my newness to this, I couldn't even determine what the needs were that I should attend to first. Nor did I have the ability to balance the research and time spent watering or weeding. I would gradually lose momentum, letting the giant lavender poppies burst seeds all over the community garden bed and probably the walkways on my neighbors' pets too. Not that I didn't take delight in this as well, that the plants will do what the plants will do. That in and of itself is beautiful. I was so busy trying to figure out what I was doing wrong, I had stopped engaging. I was so busy looking for the underlying need and listening to voices on the internet of how to solve it, I didn't trust myself to build relationship with the plants themselves. Fast forward a few years and I was incredibly fortunate to buy my own home here in Richmond. One of the things that sold me on this particular house was all the things already growing: a magnolia tree, a Japanese maple, a cherry tree, jasmine, tons of bushes I did not yet know the names of, and a hammock. That first year, the year of lockdown, I dug up some of the grass around the patio and put in some herbs. We were home all the time, so I went out often through the days just to look, to touch, to visit with the little plants. I made sun tea with some of them and started just grabbing a leaf here and there to crush and breathe in. None of this was really intentional. It was just me getting pulled into connection with the growing things. So once I had a really good year with my herbs, and I managed to grow a moonflower vine, which was living my dream, and a single sunflower that actually bloomed. The next year, I spent a day with one of my best friends who's vegan and has been growing a lot of his food in his own backyard in DC for 2 decades now. We dug up a huge swath of the grass that I had marked out with downed pine needles from a neighbor's tree. We added lime and peat and compost. We shaped it, and I had some space to try to grow some food. So just So you're not anticipating a transformational ending here. I am still struggling to successfully grow food in quantities. The other day, my daughter Isla and I each had 3 green beans with our dinner, and that felt like, that felt nurturing. It turns out that I chose a spot for the vegetables that would get shaded out more than I expected by the growth of the cherry tree, another kind of neighbor, and that many of the plants would stay rather stunted. But this year is a better year than last so far. I carved out more of the lawn for growing things, this time in the sunniest spot. But I think the real difference is not in a particular action I am taking, it is in the care, the underlying engagement, and the depth of that engagement over time. Last year, I was so consumed by work and school and life that the garden felt like a to-do item. Worse, it felt like an old love who I knew would create more love in me if I could only stop to visit, but I couldn't manage to be there enough to tend it. Tending does not actually require a lot of time, it requires attention. It requires the ability to stop, set things down, and attend. Look at the shapes and colors of leaves or the places where a dead flower needs to be picked. Watch how something is growing and might need a stake. This is true not just with the plants, but with all things. I see this with children all the time where I work. They need attending and tending. Their sheer delight when someone is truly listening to them, when they can be themselves truly, and have someone look, listen, care for their play, their questions, their struggles. That is the magic stuff. I have to believe this attention is an action, and this action builds connective tissue like a web, like making visible the invisible force that's there between us and strengthening it. It's cumulative. Over days, weeks, months, years, the fibers start to hold us like a net, join us together, help us be more tender to ourselves. When the world and all its assaults feel just like that, that web is what we need, to remember we are not alone. And if possible, to remind us that each individual moment can be a redemption. I have to believe that a smile to someone you pass or a brief moment of appreciating a leaf that is struggling to push its way up has to be enough, especially if we do it over and over again. Doing bigger things becomes easier if we are practiced at doing the small things. So back to the rhythm of the garden. In the spring, we get the seeds or tiny plants in the ground. If we're able to give them that care, we see them start to grow. By this time of year, the garden starts to become more like a riot, things growing everywhere, shoving each other around. And then when July really kicks in, the bugs start mowing things down. The heat withers smaller stuff that hasn't established itself. And it gets harder and harder to want to get out there and engage, particularly from about 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. The sun can be punishing. The plants failing can be disheartening. In case this metaphor is not present for you yet, I want to be clear. The historic weeks we have had in terms of concrete effects of an ideological shift in the Supreme Court to that of a fundamentalist Christian state feel to me like an assault, like the promise of future assaults for millions of people who don't fit that model or morality. This is the heat. This is the heat that makes it hard to go back outside. It threatens to consume us and our tender attempts at making lives for ourselves. This is when we're called to practice. Our attention, our presence, our care is all still required. It is critical that we continue to tend to our growing things. If we don't go out into it, there will be no stopping the bugs, the drought, the sun itself. We cannot fight from a position of rage and expect anything other than scorched earth. But if we can reorient ourselves, build our muscles of care, turn towards even the assailants with tenderness, then we are doing the work. Then we are doing the work that the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and nonviolence calls us to do. As Bishop Desmond Tutu says in the Book of Joy, what is true physically is in a wonderful way true spiritually as well. Deep down, we grow in kindness when our kindness is tested. It is in returning to look at the same small desiccated plants, brushing a bug off its leaf, propping it up, looking how it leans into the light, noticing the patterns of wither, that we develop the relationship, develop our vision and muscles of tenderness so that we can start to untangle what the underlying needs are, to rebuild the soil, ensure that there is enough support, and deepen our web with all. Until we have that understood, until we can see the whole picture, start small. Start with the possibility embedded in every single minute of every day. The possibility to remember that we are alive and we are connected, and that you can extend love to yourself, to plants, to children. And if you don't have a garden, where can you create a practice of care and consent? I noticed a few times while I was thinking on this that the word neighbors came up for me. This is not a coincidence. Who are our neighbors? And I don't just mean those people who might live next to you. When can you sense those momentary bonds that connect us to the person you're sitting with? The person whose little Zoom box you may be next to, the other shopping cart in the store, the car driving right alongside you. In the metaphor of the garden, we can get so focused on the product, the growing of the thing we want to grow, the determining just the right formula for success, that we are missing the constant evidence all around us of the interconnected web of our very being. When we are oriented towards tenderness and care, there are constant opportunities to participate in the world in ways that honor that web, that grow the connections. So when it is July and hot and things and spirits are desiccating, when you have heard on the news of another horrific tragedy, of further demoralizing and devaluing bad news, of a predicted future that is full of scary possibilities, when you are carrying concern for your loved ones or grief for people living through war or famine or political oppression, not one of these are little things. And in July, in this heat, they are all with us right now. When you have heard these things, when you are feeling these things, look to your left, look to your right. There are neighbors all around. They might even have 6 legs or be so small you can't see them. They might be people right in front of you all day long. They too are in this world. They too are feeling this heat. Offer them your tender attention. What does that look like? It's a different energy than caregiving. We look really. We listen really. We appreciate. We ask for consent. We encourage growth. We use our hands to help. We prop up and find support. What else do you do when you are tending? What do you need in your tenderness? You can feel free to write something in the chat if something comes to you. I've come to think more and more about modeling behavior in terms of parenting and teaching. That is not what we say, but how we are over and over again that teaches our children how to be in this world. We cannot get there through telling other people what to do. People have to experience us doing the thing. They have to experience the tenderness so that they can take it out into the world with them and share it. This is why we practice over and over. We have to practice until it becomes how we move. So start small. No one is going to be able to do this all the time. And there will be times when setting boundaries are the most tender thing you can do for yourself. But if we remember to keep our direction clear, we are moving towards care, towards each other. We will make choices about how we show up in the world that can model a different way and be a healing force in these hot times. Of course, care and tending still don't necessarily result in something glorious. And this is the leap of faith we must make. We must do it even without a guaranteed result. The result isn't the thing. We must believe that the times when it does make a difference are enough to necessitate our numerous failed attempts. That somehow the balance is there if only we say yes and open our eyes and offer our hands. These are the infinitely renewable resources we need, and they are available in every moment. Say yes, open our eyes, offer our hands. Amen.